how to correctly set up your home environment and your laptop or desktop for the PRINCE2 online proctored exam. Let's learn that in this video. So you have spent weeks, maybe months preparing for your PRINCE2 exam, right? You know your practices, you know your processes, you have done your mocks, right? But here's the thing, every single year I know candidates struggle on the exam day, not because they don't know about PRINCE2, but because their home exam setup simply wasn't compliant. Now, as an authorized training organization for PRINCE2 with Axelos and PeopleCert, I have personally seen well-prepared candidates fumble the technical side of the exam day and they get stressed out during the actual exam, and of course that results in a horrible performance despite having a great preparation. So in this video for your PRINCE2 Foundation or Practitioner exam, I'll walk you through exactly what your computer needs are, exactly what your exam room requirements would be, whether you are writing the exam from home or let's say from a remote setup. We'll also talk about what your ID requirements are and exactly when to run your laptop or desktop compatibility checks before the actual exam so that you end up on the exam day with absolutely no surprises, right? And please stick around till the end of the video because there is one particular exam day step that catches out even the most prepared candidates, which would be very important for you to learn and apply on the exam day, okay? So I'll talk about it right at the end of this video. So please subscribe to this channel if you are preparing for your PRINCE2 certification, and let's get started. So first, let's start with your computer itself, right? Because this is where the most technical failures actually begin. So PeopleCert requires Windows 10 or higher, or if you are using a Mac setup, Mac OS 2018 or above, okay? So if you are running an outdated legacy operating system, this is your first flag to sort out immediately. Now, in terms of the processing power of your PC, you need to have at least a dual core 2.4 gigahertz CPU with a 4 gigabytes of RAM as a bare minimum, okay? You can check that configuration within your PC very easily. However, please be mindful that most PCs after 2020 should hold and meet those requirements very easily. Next, what about your browser? According to PeopleCert, only Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome will work smoothly with the PeopleCert's web-based exam driver, which you need to install before the exam day. Now, my personal recommendation is to use the most updated version of Google Chrome, okay? Because you simply can't go wrong with that. Now, moving on, your internet connection. Now, your internet or Wi-Fi connection needs to be a stable, full-time broadband fiber optic connection at least of 100 megabytes per second, okay? Because a dropped or jittery connection mid-exam is not something you want to deal with, okay? Trust me. And just to be on the safe side, I always suggest my students to have anything above 250 Mbps, which is very standard these days for a Wi-Fi or a wired connection. Now, your screen resolution must be at least 124 by 768 pixels, okay? Again, most standard PCs after 2020 should meet this requirement. And here is something candidates often overlook, okay? So if you are connected to a desktop, your webcam needs to physically rotate a full 360 degrees, okay? However, it's not an issue with a laptop because you can actually turn your laptop itself by 360 degrees during the exam check-in process. However, mobile phones, of course, cannot substitute for this. Please keep that in mind. Finally, you need working speakers and a microphone on your PC, okay? Headset, whether it's a Bluetooth or a wired headset, are only permitted during the onboarding and check-in process, okay? Not during the actual exam. Right, and funnily enough, they don't teach you these as part of the PRINCE2 syllabus, right? So hit that subscribe button if you are finding this helpful. Now, before we move on to the next topic, if you are preparing for your PRINCE2 certification exam, you can use my study materials to prepare, right? I'm an authorized training provider for PRINCE2 and I have everything you will need for a solid exam preparation, ranging from free introductory guides to mock exams and full-length training courses, okay? All the relevant links will be provided in the description section of this video. Now let's move on to the second item you will need to get right, okay, which is your exam room. So this is what exactly counts as a compliant room as per PeopleCert policies, okay? So your room needs exactly one doorway in and out, okay? And it must stay visible to your webcam throughout the entire exam. Now the room also needs to be private with no transparent or glass walls, okay? And you must be completely alone in the room, and there should not be any audible background noises or any interruptions, okay? Your desk and walls needs to be clear of anything unauthorized, such as posters, post-it notes, loose papers, books, shelvings, etc. So all of those, if they are within your room, needs to be relocated out. Also, no other screens can be visible in the room, very important, other than the one which you are actually using to take your exam, right? So for example, if you have a TV or a second monitor, you cannot unplug. In a very unlikely scenario, it is always recommended that you need to cover it with a clean piece of cloth. Your lighting matters too as well, because it needs to be adequate and fairly lit without pointing directly at the camera or at your face. You can have an ensuite toilet. However, the door of the toilet needs to stay closed and also visible in the field of vision of the proctor. Yes, it's quite funny, but it is what it is, okay? Finally, there should not be anyone entering or exiting your room whilst you are in the exam, okay? Be very, very, very careful about this, because if there is someone who enters your room accidentally whilst you are in the exam, your exam will be cancelled then and there. Next, ID checks. So your ID must be exactly the same one which you used when you booked your exam, okay? And the first and the last names on the ID must match exactly as your exam registration name is. Not closely enough, exactly, okay? So for example, if you used a passport to register for the exam, it needs to be the exact same passport whilst you are checking into the exam on the exam day. If there is a slightest of mismatch, you will not be allowed to test, okay? And no refund will be issued. So please be mindful of that. Now your ID also needs to be current and valid and original, never a photocopy, and it must be a government issued national or state or provincial identity card. Electronic IDs, just for your information, are not accepted, okay? It also needs to show your full date of birth and your name in English characters. Now, what if your ID is not in English characters, right? Then you will need to select a matching proctor language when you book your exam, or for some reason, if that option is not available for you, you upload your ID at least 48 hours in advance for validation. Even better, in that kind of a situation, you might want to reach out to PeopleCert via the customer care email and get the required guidance at least 48 to 72 hours before the exam. So get your ID sorted early, because this is one area where there is genuinely no flexibility on the exam day. Now moving on to the fourth point, and this one is purely procedural, but candidates skip it far too often, which is your compatibility check for the PC system that you would be using, okay? So what is this exactly? So basically, it is a mandatory system check that tests your PC's system integrity, your audio, your camera, and your internet connection, and it needs to be completed at least 24 hours before your scheduled exam time. Now here is the catch. You must run this check on the same computer, the same camera, the same headset setup, the same network, and in the same room. Ideally, you will be using during the exam day, not a different laptop or not in a different room, okay? Also, only one screen, as I have mentioned, can be active during your exam. So if you work normally with a second or a third monitor, please disconnect it before you even start the system check. It only takes about 5 minutes to complete, and I would also strongly recommend repeating it again roughly 2 hours before your exam starts, because operating system updates can quietly change your configuration overnight and you might be hit with a surprise just before a couple of hours of your exam. Okay, so let's avoid that. And also do bear in mind that this check will not catch every issue. So for example, things like firewalls, security software, or certain enterprise settings might only surface once you connect for the real exam. So it is extremely important that you use your own personal laptop or desktop for the exam. Very important. And I always recommend that do not use your office or organizational devices whilst writing the PRINCE2 exam. You can use this link which you see on the screen to run the compatibility checks. I'll also include that in the description section of this video. Now finally, let's talk about the exam day itself. And this is where that one step which I promised you at the beginning of this video can make or break your exam. Okay, so please listen carefully. So your check-in button of the exam actually activates exactly 30 minutes before your scheduled start time. Okay, and I would strongly recommend using that full window of 30 minutes to settle in. So you'll be taking through a sequence which would be accepting the non-disclosure agreement first, reviewing your exam instructions, confirming that you have understood the exam rules, and then scanning your ID. Now once you connect with your proctor, they will run a full set of security checks. And here is the step that genuinely surprises many people. Okay, so the proctor will ask you for a close-up scan of your sleeves, your eyeglasses, your ears, and your hair. At the back of your seat, they might also ask you to scan the back of the chair which you are sitting. They might also ask you to scan below the chair which you are sitting on. Okay, funny enough, but that's the rule, just to confirm that there are no concealed devices. You may also be even asked to remove your headset or headwear briefly during the check-in, and you'll be asked to completely remove it before the exam start. And then you need to use your PC's microphone and the audio device which is inbuilt in your PC by default. Okay, now hang on, it's not over yet. Okay, on top of that, you can expect a complete 360-degree scan of the room as well. Your PC microphone must stay on and audible throughout the entire exam, which means it should not be muted, and the entire session of your exam will be recorded. So for some reason, if your connection drops, worst case scenario, do not panic. Okay, the timer pauses automatically until you reconnect back. However, that's why I always suggest getting a strong, highly reliable fiber optic connection above 250 Mbps. Okay, nevertheless, use that initial 30 minutes which we have discussed to settle in, calm down, and do those final checks before the actual exam starts. So that's it. Get your computer right, your room right, your ID right, run all your compatibility checks on time, be prepared as much as you can from an exam standpoint, and you should be fine. However, for me as an instructor, it is very important for you to understand these as well on top of having a good preparation. Because my job as your exam coach is not only to prepare you with the exam syllabus, but also to help you provide the best possible support so that you have the best possible chance to succeed on the exam day. So these kind of technicalities is very important for you to learn and understand on top of learning the actual PMP exam syllabus. So please press the like button if you have found it valuable, and I'll see you in the next video.